You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Ian McGlynn.
Good morning.
So, Ian, tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
So currently I am the non-commissioned officer in charge of the West Point parachute team. I'm assigned to the military academy, United States Military Academy here at West Point, where I teach young cadets how to skydive and do a bunch of fun stuff in the air.
Okay, I have a lot of questions than I thought I would when you said you're active military. Okay, parachuting. You're not afraid of heights?
I am actually. I am ladders. Anything to where I'm going to fall and feel it scares the shit out of me.
But
The good thing,
jumping out of an airplane is okay.
absolutely, because if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to feel a fucking thing. So I'm good.
Feel the fucking earth hit you at like 50,000 miles an hour.
Right, but see that it's like terror and darkness. Gone, no pain.
See,
So
I'm deathly afraid of heights, mostly because my dad, whenever I would get up to like a tall point, he'd just go up behind me and go, huh, and like scare the shit out of me to the point like where it was just fear every time I would even look over an edge. But jumping out of an airplane, my first thought, like, what happens if the chute doesn't open? Like, you can't think like that. I'm like, but what happens if it doesn't open? Well, shit happens.
it's probably your time to go. Now, all the parachutes that we jump have a backup parachute, so if the first one doesn't work, the second one probably will.
Probably that's the main word, because actually my buddy went to a skydiving place and there was a woman that died like 2 years prior. It was like apparently they have a person that's assigned to jump out and test the parachutes, like I
Mhm.
guess just routinely. I don't know who the hell signed up for that position, but she had two parachutes, like you're saying, a backup one. Both of them did not deploy.
That's an unfortunate occurrence. That's
That's what I'm saying. Like, you literally jump out of the airplane, pull one. Oh, I always got this spare. You pull another one, and you were just testing for your job, making what, 36,000 a year, 50, maybe, I don't know. And no, you're gonna plummet into the earth.
yeah. I feel like there's some higher power calling you home if that happens. If if both of them don't work, it was just fate was telling you it's your time to go.
The real G, we call him gravity.
Yeah, there we go.
So how'd you get started into doing parachutes? I mean, if you're afraid of heights, like, did you just see it? Like, I mean, I watched Lone Survivor. So after I watched that movie, I knew I wanted to sign up for the military. I wanted to be like, dude, I want to parachute into those places. I want to be a total badass. Is that how it started for you? Did you just think that was like the best military thing to do?
Not at all. I signed up as a parachute rigger, so we're the folks who pack all the parachutes and maintain them, both for people and for cargo and stuff. So uh, never was there a thought in my mind that I was going to use this to go, do some surreptitious infiltration into the bad guy area. I was just going to put the parachute on the back of the guy that was going to. So I got the opportunity to go in 2004 to the military free fall school, and my instructor Jamie, we're standing there on the back of the airplane, and we're 12,500 feet up, and I look down and I look at him, and he's just got this big smile on my face, and he taps me on the back and it says, "Hey man, it's time to go." And I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever fucking done, and off I went. And freedom, the incredible feeling of freedom is unlike anything I have ever experienced, and I experienced that with every jump. Still, I'm at 1,300 plus now, and every single time, the most terrifying moment is the half second before you actually let go. But the moment you let go, it's flight, and it's loud and it's violent and it's crazy, but it's controlled and it's so peaceful at the same time. It's bizarre. It's the weirdest thing. I have a weird head.
It's just, I think everyone experiences that because like the minute you jump off, it's that panic, like you still have time, you still like people trying like, stop themselves before they jump, like hurry up and try and grab back. But once you fall and realize there's nothing left, like you're committed now, there's nothing you can do. You're literally out of a I think for a lot of people it's hard to process that you literally just jumped out of a functionally perfect airplane. Like that's a lot for some people. Like, to be like, why did we jump? It was perfect. You know what I mean? But it's that thought. And then I know some people, like some skydiving instructors, that like to torture the people by like, hey, turn around. And then you see, and you get to see the whole airplane just leaving. It's like, you just missed the boat to go to a whole nother country. It's like that slow, oh God.
Yeah. Funny thing you mentioned, perfectly functioning airplane in the skydiving community. We know that that's not a thing. Every airplane is just in a very state of disrepair. This one just happened to work. So you're better off leaving than landing in that thing because it's a giant metal box. The theory of flight is bullshit. So I'd rather land under a parachute than in a giant metal box full of my, 25 of my bestest good friends.
Do you find that there's a lot of people like you have to obviously you have to teach people how to jump out of an airplane, but do you find that a lot of people are like already into it, like let's do it? Or do you find that more people are just like, oh, this is never happening. I'm not even getting up into the airplane. Like, how do you talk someone through something like that?
Most people are pretty willing. They just, it's either a fear to overcome, it's a bucket list item, it's stepping into some form of unknown. The people that you have to convince to do it are the people that are being forced to do it, and those are generally the worst students that you could have because they're not seeking it to improve or to be better or to do something that they want to do. It's being forced upon them. And we saw that a lot. I was an instructor years later after I went in 2004. I was an instructor at the free fall school, and a lot of the guys that come through that course are forced to be there. They're required. It's part of their job to be there. And there's guys that just didn't want to do it, and they were the hardest people to teach. The guys who wanted to go and wanted that adventure and that excitement were the easiest students ever. So a big difference when you're teaching folks that don't have to do it for a job. There is a general desire to do it, to achieve it, and the motivation behind those is variant. It's all about the person.
You're dealing with a specific line of people that are coming to you for this position, right? It's not like you're like, hey, come on, we're going skydiving today. You're like getting specific people that are like, oh, this is what we want to do in the military, so we have to go through this type of training first.
At the free fall school, yes, but here at the academy, no. We are an extracurricular activity, so they actually try out to be a part of the team. They volunteer to do this. They want to go and do one of the our culminating events for our seniors, because we take the cadets on as freshmen, and we have them their entire time here. So one of the big things for the seniors is flying the football into the home football games, the game ball. They want to deliver the game ball. So that's the big drive. As freshmen, they have to sit up in the stands and watch these 3 or 4 seniors come flying in to a game under parachute, and that's their motivation. They want to be a part of something like that. So for here, it's completely voluntary. They choose to do it. A lot of them are drawn to the team. Here is an incredibly family oriented type of team. We spend 7 days a week together, multiple hours a day. So the family aspect of the West Point parachute team is one of the bigger draws. But then there's the whole skydiving thing. That's pretty fun, cool too.
Yeah, I did HVAC in school, and I know this is kind of like a big leap, but if you want to talk about a bonding experience with your classmates, like we had this class for 3 years. So every day we're spending 2-3 hours a day with each other. You only get what, like 7-8 hours at school. So most of our day was together in this one class. It was a small group of people too, like 12. It ended up like, I think 2.5 years in, one of our classmates actually got hit by a car and was killed. So, but it was a big impact. Like you saw it on everybody. Like people were coming to us from other classrooms, dropping off gifts. Like we were the family members. And it was like, you want to talk about like how well you get to know somebody and develop, first of all, like a family relationship with someone that is not blood to you. That was the realest experience that I've ever had. Because I mean, everyone felt it when you walked into the class after he was gone. It was something, and we still, most of us keep in contact today. We've become like just close knit group. I mean, we're 6 years out of school, so I mean, I understand the whole bonding experience behind that for sure.
Absolutely, it becomes this. It's a great tool as well because there's always that honeymoon phase. So when everybody like first, when you first got to your class, I'm sure everybody was doing the polite, I don't know you yet, so I'm going to say the right things and kind of be gentle. And you don't get that real picture of somebody until you're past that honeymoon phase, and then you get into that, that agitation phase where people's personalities start conflicting and clashing a little bit. And then there's just this time where it molds, where it goes from that from being a clash to being complementary. This person's hyper dramatic, this person is overly mellow, and together they just form this perfect balance. And one of the amazing, we see that transition usually happens sophomore to junior year, where that class of 10 that came in as freshmen, that's where they get that solid mold, and they become this just unit. And then after that happens, they envelop themselves into the team, and it just becomes this one just conglomerate that goes forward. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, for our HVAC class, it was crazy because we had it our freshman year till like our junior, about ending of senior year. And this is like this age when kids are developing their hormones, especially like a bunch of teenage boys. So you have us in a giant metal shopping class, tearing apart HVAC units with hammers, screwdrivers, any type of tool just to get the junk metal off of the thing. So you randomly see one
Destruction.
Yeah, someone just chucks a hammer across class at somebody, and Duck's like, "What the hell was that for?" Like, "You pissed me off." I'm like, that was happening all the time. I'm like, this doesn't seem safe.
Throwing hammers generally is, well, I mean, I guess it depends on the environment, but
And
yeah.
half the time we weren't even angry. It was like, "Hey man, can you toss me that Phillips screwdriver?" Someone just chucks it like halfway across. Like, I mean, at this point, you're not even talking about tossing it like underhand grandma hand toss. You're talking about like chucking it like you're a baseball pitcher at opening night or something. It's like, whoa, and it sticks right into the wall. Like, what the hell? And the guy's like, "You said you wanted." He goes, "That's not even a Phillips head." He throws another one. It's like, oh shit! Like what? It's crazy because like the developmental relationship in that period and stage, there's also the type of stage called graduation. It's more towards the end when everybody's about to leave each other. And it's when that class is obviously graduating. But it's like, even if you had your disagreements, you whatever, you don't even look at those anymore, but you start to miss people. Same thing with high school, where people are like, "Oh, missed high school so much." You really fucking didn't. It was just the thing that you realize you're never going to see those people again. People that became so affected into your lives, whether they were good or bad, it didn't matter, because all you think of is the good times. Like, damn, I'm never gonna see your face again, that face that makes me just want to punch it. Like it's that feeling, and that's crazy too, to see the twists and turns that your brain kind of navigates. And first of all, the relationships you can have with just like a close group of people.
Absolutely. We did an interview video. I'm getting ready to leave here this upcoming summer, and one of the big things I want to leave is my view. So the cadets have their view of what happens with the team and all that, but my view as a staff member looking into the world of the cadets. So I'm putting together this video where I asked, it's an interview type video, and it's been amazing that one of the questions is, what is your saddest memory of the team? And every single person has answered graduation. Graduation is their saddest, and not because, but because they have to now go their separate ways, and they're going to lose that intimate day-to-day contact with these people. So yeah, at high school, same thing. Fuck high school. I don't miss that shit at all. There are people. It's the people that, for me, moving multiple bases in the military, every time we have to go somewhere, it's never the job. I never miss the job. I never miss the base itself. It's always the team that I had at that location that we miss.
What's your most memorable experience doing this type of work?
Most memorable.
Either it can be good. Let's do with a good one, and then if you have a really bad experience, because I feel like with parachuting, there's definitely got to be one really bad experience.
So the good one is every time you're teaching somebody how to skydive, obviously it's really, you can't talk to them while you're in free fall, so you have to use hand and arm signals. And there is always a moment where you give them a hand signal and they actually listen to you, and it fixes everything. And their entire face, like their whole body shifts. Like, holy shit, you were right. This is awesome. They're out of control. You tell them to do something, they actually do it, and it fixes everything. And it's that aha moment. seeing that face, their aha moment that is where I derive my joy from in teaching skydiving. Like, oh my God. And then of course they land and they come running up like, that was fucking awesome. That's probably the best memory and I'll take away from this job.
What's the responsibility behind that? Like, what tips do you try and help out with? Like, is it just because when you jump out of an airplane and somebody's free falling, they're immediately in so much panic for the first couple of minutes, you're trying to get them to pay attention and realize like you can't fix anything. It's all about paying attention now. Like for me, if I jumped out of an airplane, I'd be screaming, flailing my arms the whole entire time. Doesn't matter if I was attached to somebody, I'd be freaking out. And you're sitting there trying to yell at the person like, hey, you know what? Like, pay attention. You got to make sure you pull the cord at this time. Trying to calm somebody down. Like, the only thing I can really, I guess, kind of experience, I can kind of relate with that. Not me per se, but my grandfather used to, he went to Vietnam and everything like that. He was talking about the training things when he was like 18 years old, getting drafted into the military. And he says there was a point where you're learning how to use grenades and people are throwing them and you have to talk the person out, or it is to talk the person into throwing the grenade, because some people would pull the pin and sit there with it in their hands, like stuck, frozen, and you have to sit there and shout at them, like, throw it, you have to throw it. And they're just frozen in fear. I mean, that's got to be the same thing when you're falling. I mean, whatever, 5,000 feet down to earth, 10,000 feet, however high you went up. And you're literally like, holy fuck, you're just in that fuck me state where you literally you can't talk somebody out of it. It's got to be so difficult.
It's interesting. The deer in the headlights is what we call it, where they leave and frozen. They're absolutely frozen. They are not seeing anything, and there's no nothing. There's really only two things you can really do as an instructor at that point. You can try to get them back in the game, which is what we try to do. So we have a hold of them. I've smacked people in the face before, like, hey, wake up, like, we're here, we need to do work. But for me, it's mainly getting to them, so we've got a hold of them anyway when we're doing their first few jumps, but turning them to look me in the face and getting like their eyeballs into my eyeballs and smiling. The smile, showing them that you are totally comfortable, totally calm, and having a great time is probably the most effective tool to break somebody out of that mindset, that fear capsule, if you want to call it that. That's been the best. Now, there are some folks who I've had one, in all the people I've taught, I've had one person that did not come out of it. And at that point, you just hang on, you keep them safe. And then when it comes time to pull, you open their parachute for them. In that particular case, that guy, I would tell him to look at his altimeter. He'd look at his altimeter, but wouldn't do anything. So basically he's just coming down like altimeter space, no effective action at all. And so it's just a matter of waiting. Time came, I pull his parachute, and as I pull his parachute, it starts to open and he drifts away. That's when he came out of it. And he looked down at me as his parachute's opening and I'm falling away from him. And you could just see, he just mouthed, he's like, fuck, because he knew he messed up that whole dive.
So we're talking about, like, you have people that are jumping separately by themselves and get frozen in fear like that. So you have to kind of fly at them and then grab onto them and like try and pull Jesus Christ. Like, you want to talk about like, dude, that's so, I can't even, there's no words to really describe that. Cause I'm thinking you're sitting here with a person hooked in front of you. They have all the control and it's like, oh, pull the cord, pull the cord, pull the cord. You're not pulling the cord, but no, you're talking about like everybody's jumping separate. Next thing you know, you pull your cord and you see Jimmy still hurtling at earth freaking fast as shit. Like, he's not pulling his cord. And he's just flying, I'm free falling.
Yep. That's, we, as instructors, we always try to get them open before we open. But now all of the skydiving equipment has these automatic opening devices that sense pressure, speed, and altitude. And at a certain altitude, it's going to fire off your reserve for you anyway. So you just sit there and do nothing, and you will have a parachute eventually over your head. So one of the it's kind of a dark thing, but as instructors, we always say, hey, don't make one fatality too. Don't spend the rest of your life trying to save his. So at a certain point in time, you've got to wave off and save your own life and trust that, that automatic opening device is going to stop them. But when it comes to tandems, so that's where the person is strapped to you. That's easy. There are so many ways to manipulate your passenger. if they freak out. And I've had 2 freakouts with tandems, to where they like grab a hold of my arm. But those systems are built so beautifully that this person has a hold of this arm. I've got this other arm free. I have total control of my parachute, of everything. Uh, so it really works out. I prefer uh, my tandem passenger to freak out, because generally I can outfly whatever they're trying to do and keep us safe. It's the when you're teaching somebody to skydive and they're in that solo mode where they have their own parachute. That's where it gets challenging, and it is fun, but there is a lot of responsibility, and therefore my fear meter goes up a couple ticks when we're doing that.
I mean, super spy mode, dude. Like you jump out of an airplane, some dude's flying way in front of you with his parachute not pulling. You got to fly at him, dude. That's got like that stuff you see in movies like Mission Impossible and things of that, man. That's crazy. See, I've talked to so many people that do skydiving, and for me, it's not a thing. But I was like, if I jump tandem with somebody and our chute does not pull, I'm going to try and at the last second turn myself over to where he hits first. I don't know if that's a evil side of me, but it's like, look, maybe there's a possibility I land on top of him and then I just break all my bones or something, but I'm not crushed into powder. But I know that's an idiotic thing, but I'm like, even if there's that slight 0.1%, like we talk about, there's a dude that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived, and he said halfway down he thought it was a bad idea, and he broke literally every bone in his body. I was like, maybe I'd be that percent. I'm hurtling at the earth, and I'm like, fuck it. Here we go. Aim for water. Aim for the bushes, I would say.
You hear these stories of people jumping and parachutes not working and them surviving. I think there was a story about this guy in Russia who's the longest free fall ever to survive. Ended up hitting a hillside, so he came down at an angle and then landed in the snow, and the snow was like 2 or 3 feet deep, and that's what saved his life. I think, I don't remember the specifics of his injuries. I think there were some, but nothing so significant that he couldn't get himself up and out of that situation, which is unbelievable. You think about terminal velocity and the effects terminal velocity and Earth have on the human body. It's pretty insane that somebody could survive that.
Yeah, there's only a certain amount of force that we can withstand, and so we can go unconscious too. I don't think a lot of people look at that. Like, do you experience the same type of G force, I guess you would say, when you're hurtling at the earth, or is it a different type of force?
It's totally different. We experience G-force when we're spinning out of control. So there's different types of like for tandems, if you and your passenger happen to get sideways, those spins can get out of control. At the free fall school, when the first couple jumps, when students would jump all of their combat equipment, their big rucksacks and their all that stuff, if they got sideways, that 70-pound bag would act as just an inertia generator, and then that G-force happens. That's when you see like the blood vessels in the eyes break, they go unconscious, that kind of thing. But generally, when you're just flat, belly to earth, you don't experience any of that at all. There's no falling sensation when you leave. When you leave an airplane, you go into that relative wind so quickly that they're really like, there's no roller coaster feel.
You really just feel weightless.
Yeah. Yeah, you go. It's the crest of the hill on a roller coaster where your stomach kind of comes up and then drops back down. That 0G turn doesn't exist. It's not there. So the moment you step off, you're into 120 mile an hour relative wind, and you're flying the whole time.
I mean, do you try and do tricks when that's happening too? You're doing like backflips and stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's like literally when you're on a trampoline trying to do front flips and back flips, except you got this trampoline jump that's like 12,000 feet or something.
Yep.
I mean, that's got to be an amazing experience. Did you ever see that, like, from a kid that you were going to be wanting to do that? Like, how I understand, like, you're afraid of heights, but like, man, that's just a giant leap. Like, people say conquer your fears. Like, if you're afraid of water, just learn how to swim or something. But that's a big gap, dude. Like, you went full on in and literally jumped out of an airplane.
I never had any desire to skydive growing up as a kid. Never thought about jumping. Never. The first time jumping entered any equation in my life was when I started talking to a recruiter to join the Army, and they're like, "Hey, you can jump out of airplanes and pack parachutes. It's a super cool job." The sales pitch, and that's what got me. I'm like, all right, well, we'll give this a shot, and it started there, and it was, it was cool. The first type of jumping I did was very low altitude, round parachutes, no control. You just, it's 100 dudes filing out the back of an airplane, kind of like a mass assault type parachuting. Very different from the high altitude stuff that I did later on. The high altitude stuff, it's a lot. You're in control of everything. You fly your body, you fly your parachute, everything, where you land, how you land, all that stuff. It's entirely on you. And that freedom of choice is what really kind of drew me in. And it's cool. It's just fucking cool.
It's badass. You get that title on your resume, dude. It doesn't matter what job you're applying for. I think you'd automatically get hired. I put that on my Tinder profile. I'd be like, look, by the way, I jump out of airplanes. What? You do what? Like, yeah. You might sell shoes, but I jump out of airplanes. Okay. See, I've heard a couple stories from skydiving instructors who talk. I know there was this one, Bill Burr. I don't know if you know him. He's a famous comedian. He has a joke about, there was this guy who ran a successful parachuting business, built it up for like 30 something years. And then he gifted it to his son. Like, you're going to run the business now. I'm going to retire. After, I think it was a week and a half, his son took somebody up on a flight. It was a 2-person flight. It took up these 2 people, and the dude jumped out of the airplane without a parachute and killed himself, and basically tanked a 30-year business. And I'm like, there's got to be that moment. Like, is there a wellness check that you have to do with some of these people that go on? Like, is there a mental check? Like, 'cause I feel like a lot of people try and sign up for something like that already knowing it. Like, I'm not even going to pull the cord, dude.
There are instances of that happening. And unfortunately, you sign a waiver, but in the waivers that I've seen, there isn't a, are you feeling sad today? That question isn't there. So there is some of that risk that's associated with it. And that comes with when it's somebody that works at a drop zone, the people that work with them, the people that are there every single day, knowing that person, hey, you look a little off today. Is today's just not your day to jump, or that kind of thing. The hip checks that you get from your buddies to your left and your right about where you are. A lot of times, if it's a new person coming in, you can't tell. You don't know that person. You don't know anything about them, their signs or symptoms of whatever. So there is that, you assume that risk when somebody new comes up and says, hey, I want to go do this. All right, well, I'm going to trust my ability to save them over their ability to kill themselves. But one thing that's important to keep in mind though too, after that parachute opens, it's really on them. Because obviously we can't fly their parachutes for them when they're doing solo jumps. They've got to.
There's not really, like you said, there's not really a subtle tell either. It's not like some dude's coming in going, like, putting on a parachute, like, yeah, man, wife just divorced me, kids left me, basically lost my house, lost my car, I got nothing left to my name, family died, it's all crazy. And it's like, slowly look at him and be like, I'm gonna need you to take that parachute off. Like, why? Be like, I'm not thinking you're gonna, want to be coming back from anything. So let's save for another day. It's like I said, there's no easy subtle tell of something that's gonna happen. So that's always got to be a worry. But a lot of times, like, you get someone that's in a bad mood, a bad thing, just looking over at and be like, hey man, trying to bring them into the realization of the moment too. Like, that's going to pass. It's just a problem in your head right now, but let's clear your head. I think skydiving is probably a really good thing for that too. I mean, when you're jumping out of an airplane, you're falling, like, looking around. Like, I know when a lot of people say when you pull the cord, like, this is your time to look around and literally enjoy the moment, because this is something a lot of people will never fucking see.
I have said that almost verbatim to tandem passengers, to people that I'm skydiving with, that stop looking down. The earth will be there in 4.5 minutes for you to look at. Right now, you need to look out. And you see it so much. People spend that first jump, those first couple jumps, looking at the ground. There's nothing down there. We're literally going to be there in a short amount of time. Look out. What do you see out in front of you? You're 2 miles up. That's a different view of the earth that you don't normally get. And depending upon the environment that you're jumping in, we jump here. I'm up in the Hudson Valley. We jump at Skydive the Ranch, and it's right there at the Shawangunk Mountains, which you can see on the ground from the drop zone. But once you get up above them, the lakes and the hills that are beyond that first ridge line, gorgeous. And they're out to the west. So when you're doing that sunset jump, the sun's setting back behind the mountains and the water, and it's fucking beautiful. And people miss it because they're looking at the ground. Like
So that's actually a good point I was going to ask too. So you have like, do you do sunrise jumps? Do you do sunset jumps? Like, I mean, is there specific times? Obviously you can't jump at night, but so you have like a last ride that goes out, like this is our last flight of the day, sunset. You're going to be able to see like literally the earth, or not earth, but the sun hit the horizon and get to see that breaking point where the red or the blue turns to reds and oranges. I was a jet ski instructor. So we have a morning ride where you get to see the sun rise, literally touching the water's edge coming up. We got jet skis all in this balanced, perfectly flat water. I mean, God, if you want to talk about ride, I mean, doing jet skis was fun. Okay. After 2 weeks, you're like, fuck this job. And so many people are like, why would you say that? Like, you're on a jet ski. It's going to be awesome. It's fun for 2 weeks. Then you're sick of it because you're getting nothing but bumpy waters. You're dealing with, like, I went out in northeasterns where storms were coming and my jet skis were flipping left and right. I've been out in hurricanes. When Hurricane Sandy came, I was out in that. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. There's a hurricane going on. We're still running jet skis. Yeah, people want to go jet skiing. It's like, I don't fucking care if people want to go jet skiing. Do you not see that the waves in the bay right now are literally as big as the ocean? Like, yeah, well, just be safe out there, you know? It's like, okay, all right. But those rides are like, I think one of my most memorable experiences, and I want to ask you this too, doing, skydiving, but it was a last ride. We're near Assateague, and if you're ever out in Ocean City, Maryland, we have water on both sides of us. So Assateague is like this nature reserve. A lot of people go and have bonfires on the beach. A lot of ponies, all these types of things that are out there. We're on the water, so a lot of people don't get to see it from this angle unless you own a boat. So we're going to our riding area, and after like an hour, you see the sun start to set down a little bit on the horizon line. You're like, all right, here we go, time to bring them back. Nice formed, perfect ride. I'm like, water like glass, where you're just like floating on air. Like I'm enjoying it myself, instructing these people. They're supposed to be falling behind me like little ducks. I'm like just going side to side, enjoying it, taking them the long way around. And I'm seeing all these horses that are all on the beach, like just staring up at me, and also kind of all like playing together. And I mean, it was something out of a movie, man. There's 20 of them, and then this orange sunset coming down to where it lit. I mean, most of my Instagram photos come from those jet ski rides that I would go on, because they were just beautiful moments that you would never see without doing this job. You got to have some moment like that sticks in your head.
Yes. So there are hard limits to times that we can fly and we can't fly. FAA kind of determines those as far as like what it has to do with, the time of the sunrise, the time of the sunset. So yes, there is a sunrise lift and there's a sunset lift. The sunrise lifts are amazing because you get two sunrises. And that never made sense to me. Somebody was like, "Oh, you're going to experience two sunrises." Well, what the hell do you mean? So you go up 2 miles, you jump
and
out,
you see it.
The sun's coming up. You land, the sun hasn't hit there yet. So you get to watch a second one. So 2 sunrises in the same day. And that's just fucking cool.
I never thought of that, dude. That has to be so badass. Be like, the sun's not up yet. We're going. Just wait. You get up there. It's like, hey, I could see the sun. Like, yep. And then you're going to see it again when we hit the ground. You're like, what do you mean? And then you get on the ground. You're like, oh, shit, we beat the sun up. It's like, yeah. You want to talk about getting up before the rooster crows? We literally got to see the sunrise twice. A lot of people probably don't ever get to experience that.
No, it's pretty fun. Cool. Sunsets are gorgeous. All of them. Sunset loads. Those are the lifts where I slow down. I pull high because I want to spend that time, in free fall. It's cool, but free fall is very fast, and it's a very small percentage of the actual skydive. So I'll pull high, get my parachute open early, just so I can spend some time sitting under canopy and taking in what is actually there in front of me, and the beauty, and just taking that moment of just quiet reflection to just soak in what's there.
I feel like it's also got to be kind of like difficulty too when it comes to like you have to kind of narrow down the wind trajectory and everything. If a lot of people pull high, they probably like you're not paying attention to a wind or a gust and end up getting blown off target. Like you guys have a landing point you have to get to. Like you have to fall in this general area. How many people ever swing out of that bounds?
Often.
Often.
Often. Yeah. So the release point where you actually jump out of the plane is calculated, and generally that's upwind of your landing area. So you're drifting, downwind and land in your landing area. People lose sight of that. People don't pay attention. People don't actually take the time to look and see what the winds are doing, up at altitude. So they have a tendency to not make the landing area and land in various places, hopefully safely.
You ever have anybody like kind of get in danger or get hurt from landing? I feel like because that's also a really hard part too. From what I've heard about people that skydive, like a couple friends that have done it, they say like landing, you just don't expect it. They say keep your feet out, you know what I mean? That type of thing. Next, thing you know, they don't do it right or they don't run into it when they land. And next, thing you know, they hit the ground pretty hard and like fall, hit their face, and the parachute just drags them. Specifically, my one buddy, shout out to him, who literally got laughed at by his instructor and everything. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, you're in total control of your parachute. So if you don't do it right, the potential for injury is significant. There's a whole lot of ground training and practice that goes in before you go and do it. So the knowledge is there. As instructors, we hope that the knowledge is there. And then for your first few jumps, you're on the radio. So we're talking to the students as they come into land, like, okay, cool, turn now, flare, stand it up, put your feet and knees together, slide it in or whatever. The first 2 or 3 jumps after they come off of radio is generally where we see the big mistakes, because now it's all on their own. There's not somebody giving them the answers to the test. They've got to drive that parachute down to the target on their own. And then they have to they've got to slow that parachute down in order to land safely. And sometimes they don't. And injuries are a part of the sport, just like any sport, though. Ours is a bit more extreme because of the environment in which the sport operates. But if you were to look at injury rates comparative to, like, I don't know, football or soccer or something, it'd be probably about on par.
Well, the risk and reward, I mean, obviously it's a bigger reward too. I mean, the obviously when you do anything, you can hurt yourself. I could stub my toe going on the steps and break my foot. I mean, the most common injury you guys probably would see, if you're going to see any, is probably something with someone not bending their knees properly or getting, hitting the ground or something, but like maybe, a bruise or so, but maybe a broken foot at like the highest possibility just because of the way you land. Like how many times you can jump wrong and next thing you know, you land on your foot and break something. I mean, half the times I get out of bed, I hear a pop. I'm like, maybe I should just lay back down.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're relatively common. So arms and legs, because of how fast you're coming in, bones weren't really made to sustain that. Also, individuals' health has a huge impact. So if you have somebody like yourself who works out regularly, has a good system and all that stuff, they can withstand a bit more of an impact than, let's say, the 65-year-old guy who's coming out to do skydiving before he dies. You know what I mean? You bounce a lot better than the old guy. So again, there's a whole lot of factors that kind of play into that. But it's arms and legs that break first, usually ankles. Yeah.
How did you go from this? And it's going to be kind of a segue, but into your podcast about whiskey. Like, where did that come about? I mean, the first thing I think of is the fact that like sometimes people need alcohol to get over a fear. Like I know a lot of people that have social anxiety. Like one person I had on my podcast, he told me before that he was like, I had to take a shot to come over here. My anxiety is so bad. I'm like, I'm in my fucking PJs. Like we're not doing any, like, I'm like, I don't have any prep into this. He's like, I had to take a shot, dude. Before I leave the house every morning, I got to take a shot. So what is that kind of how it was for you? You had to, need a drink to get you through the door?
Whiskey is never something I have needed. It's always been something that I've just enjoyed. Managing substance abuse, the military, we get a front row seat to a lot of ugly shit, and one of those things is substance abuse. So I had plenty of friends who have struggled with alcohol and who have, we've watched the impact it's had on their lives. So it's never been something that I've needed, required to function, I guess would be said. There have been days, that shitty days where, things didn't go as planned, and I came home and I had a good stiff drink. But I've always, in those kinds of times for me, that's generally when I close my bar. That's when I lock the doors, because I know if I allow that to happen, I'm not going to go one. I'm going to go, 2 bottles in, and then it's just bad. So I know myself well enough to discipline. But the love for whiskey came, like a bunch of other folks' whiskey story. It started with Jim Beam White Label. I thought that was just phenomenal whiskey. That was my favorite. I loved mixing it. I couldn't really drink it straight because I hadn't developed that yet. But that's where I started, and started kind of looking outside of that and dabbling and getting into some other whiskeys. And then sure enough, 10 years later, I now am looking into the history of whiskey and where it started, how it is intertwined in American history. And that is where my podcast is. That's the happy place where I'm looking to bring my podcast is.
What's your type of things that you've learned about whiskey through history? The most thing I can think of that comes to mind when I think of alcohol in our history is the fact that the prohibition. I mean, there was a major point in our history where alcohol was illegal, and that's what experienced the moonshining effect. And all these people that became moonshiners trying to sell this illegal substance and stuff. And it's become one of the most popular legal drugs that really shouldn't be that legal when it comes to how some people take it. But I mean, for alcohol, for me, man, I've had some really good experiences with alcohol, but I know the dangerous effects behind it because I've had family members that suffer from like severe addiction to it and had to watch it basically affect my childhood and stuff. So I kind of learned to steer away from any type of substance. Also, I've had a hell of a lot, like a few bad experiences where, I mean, I've talked about it in the podcast before. I'll admit to it, knocking myself out, drinking Fireball whiskey. I knocked myself out while taking a piss. I mean, it was the simple shit like that. And then going, like, I'm a big fitness freak. So um, going to the gym that whole 2 days after drinking a whole giant bottle of Fireball by myself, because I was like, oh, I can do this. It tastes good. Cinnamon, I guess. I was drinking sips of it. And by the end of or halfway through my Netflix movie, it all hit me at once. I was like, I'm not getting hammered. So I just kept going and going. And then after waking up on the bathroom floor, going to the gym the next day, the next 2 days after that, I was sweating nothing but fucking cinnamon. And to the point where if you make French toast around me, fuck going to a Denny's. That's not happening. If anybody gets French toast, it's over with. I get so sick to my stomach.
Yeah, the the oral factory recall, right, where we associate a smell to an experience that made us feel terrible. To this day, I cannot drink Fat Tire beer. I had the details of the story. It was a bad night, and the single worst alcohol experience ever was due to Fat Tire beer, and that was 7-8 years ago. I can't smell it. I can't, like, nothing. If that's the only beer around, like, no, I'm good. I'll sip water all day. But yeah, that the memory that's all attached to the our olfactory senses that it like it triggers that same feeling. So yeah, no, it's and you hear a lot of those stories, and you hear a lot of the they had that one experience, and that just kind of pushed them away from everything. And it happens. And that's, for me, it was about keeping that story to just like one, you know what I mean? It was always about, moderation. I mean, I like whiskey, and I will sip and get fuzzy, but never to the point to where I am incapacitated for the next day. Because like you, like, I don't, that shitty feeling of being hungover is.
You feel like you have an extra layer of dirt onto you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like it's crazy because, like, first of all, I want to ask, like, why whiskey, if anything, from just an average beer? Like, I know a bunch of people that like are big beer fanatics, beer aficionados is what they call them, or craft beer enthusiasts. I mean, they're I mean, it's cool. Like it's an appropriate drink to have at a social setting. When someone pulls out a whiskey, you're like, why the fuck are you pulling out a whiskey right now? It's like it's 5 p.m. It's like you don't have anything to celebrate over. Like whiskey is seen as like a celebratory act. You know what I mean? Someone pulls out a whiskey, or you're sitting down with like one of your grandparents or something you haven't seen in forever, and they're like, let me pour you a shot of whiskey. You're like, what? You're like, this tastes like gasoline. You're like, yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of responses that are very similar to that. One of my best friends, Corey, he supports my whiskey habit, but every time he buys me a bottle, or gives me a bottle, he's got to take one of the first pulls off that bottle with me, and he does. He's obligated to, and so he does. But it's the oh my god, it's gasoline. It's just alcohol. For me, whiskey, it's about how it's made, where it came from, and the amount of time that goes into developing the product that is in your glass. Whiskey's not one of those things where, like vodkas and gins. I can go cook some grains, throw those into a still, and literally bottle a vodka the same day. So it's fast. With whiskey, you go through the distillation process. You got to shove it in a barrel, and then you've got to go put it away for a couple of years.
You don't make your own, do you?
Oh no.
I was about to say, you were talking like you have your own distillery in the back. I'm like, look, we're gonna have to start a moonshining business if we're doing this.
No, I don't want to make it. I just want to tell the story about it. That's all. That's really my drive. So that story starts, with some guy, getting a bunch of, corn, rye, and barley, and then cooking it up, and then using yeast to extract the alcohol, and then hopefully it works. That's the greatest thing about this, is that they put this liquid into a barrel and they put it in a warehouse, and they say, well, we hope that works. And as you talk to a lot of the folks in the whiskey industry, there's a lot of times where that just doesn't work. They pull the barrel out 4 years later, they open it up, they taste it, and like, oh, that sucks. and so now they got to start over 4 years later. And so what you see in the bottle is the product of trial and error over years and years of time. And that alone, I've got a 20-year-old bottle of whiskey that was bottled in 2018. So, 1998 is where was when they made the distillate, put it in the barrel, and then put it away. Well, what was going on in my life in 1998? I was 18, getting ready to, get married. I got married to my wife in high school, and so, I look back at that time where that was being distilled, and now here, 20 years later, the life that I have lived in that 20-year span, while this whiskey has just been sitting in a barrel, getting older and older and older, is what is absolutely exciting, and
do you ever
draws me in.
Do you ever drink it and be like, oh, that tastes like 1998? Yeah, that definitely does.
Yeah, because a lot of your older whiskeys taste like wood.
Like wood.
So yeah, like wood. Yeah, it's old.
What's your favorite types? Okay, like name a few brands. I mean, I don't want to give them a plug or anything, but I'm saying, like, for me, like I know what vodka is, like if it's clear in a bottle and stuff like that. I know the basic ones, and I know when whiskey, like, does Jaeger count as whiskey? Because that's like it doesn't count as whiskey.
Not even a little bit.
What is it then?
It's cough syrup that the Germans have just mass produced and put out. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I'm not sure how it's made or what the ingredients are. I'd have to look into that, but it
tastes like black licorice, man. I remember my birthday's on New Year's Eve. So like I always tell, like, I don't drink at all. I'm not a big, like I'm 21, but I haven't bought a legal thing of alcohol. So it's always someone like gets it from me. Oh, we got to drink. We got to party. I'm like, I'm not about it. I'll be a sober driver for you in case you get fucked up. But, for me, it was like I've had my experience with it, and it was never good. So, but when it comes to a bonding experience, I did a podcast, one of my first ones on New Year's Eve on my birthday at my buddy's house. So we're sitting there watching the ball drop, and he bought a giant thing of Jack Daniels. So we're, enjoying it. I obviously had to take a picture of the bottle before we started, put that up on Instagram, be like, hey, everybody, guess what? But it was so cool because, like, I'm sitting there like talking to him, and like he's a social guy to me, but he is very, very concealed with a lot of his words that he says. I mean, he's one of my best friends to this day. Shout out to Skylar George, first podcast we ever did, talking about poop the whole time. Love it. It was funny because he mentioned it the other day and we were on our way to the movies, and he was like, dude, do you ever get one of those shits? I'm like, is it crazy how like ever since we were kids, our conversations have not really evolved, and you really got to consider we're adults now? And he goes, but poop's always okay to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, I talk about it a lot with random people too. He's like, yeah, I know you're pretty open on your podcast. I'm like, oh, fuck it, you know. But like the experience we had, like he lost a brother to a heroin addiction. It was a big impact into all of our lives. But he even told me on the podcast, like I might have lost a brother, but I gained one. Like and hearing that, like I still will record back to that and look at that podcast. And that was a very, very strong moment in my life where I look at, that just a bottle of Jack Daniels, like you brought that out of him. Like that, like, you know what I mean? Something that was never ever been said before, and something that was kind of taboo to say just because you were afraid to show any type of emotion around your buddies. But like, it's the conversation. It's why I kind of started this podcast was you have conversations with people in moments in your life that are around a bonfire, like 2 o'clock in the morning, or in a moment where you guys are drinking together. I mean, I remember we played Quentin Tarantino film Django, and the amount of times he said the N word, you have to take a shot. I mean, 30 minutes into the movie, you're fucked. Yeah, it was, and I remember Big Lebowski is one of my favorite movies too. So we would do, we made White Russians and we drank those for the movie. Like I know a lot of people that do podcasts where they read a book or they watch a movie and they drink a thing themed to that. But man, the impact of it, as much as I can sit there and talk shit on it, it also has benefits too. I think anything is good in a certain amount, never overdoing it.
Moderation is absolutely key when it comes to, for me anyway, when it comes to consumption. I'm a part of a whiskey society, I guess, for lack of a better term.
We're talking about like Freemasons with whiskey?
No, not that structured, but it's called the Whiskey Tribe. I don't know if I'm allowed to actually say them out loud, but anyway, but once a quarter, so 4 times a year, the group does a dry week. We do, it's voluntarily, you basically, you set up from this time to this time, from this Friday to this Friday, no booze, 0 booze. And the whole premise behind that is
refining your palate.
Well, that happens, which is awesome, but it's more about a temperature check on you and your consumption. How do you survive a week without alcohol? Do you survive it very well? Do you have no issues? That's great. Do you find yourself struggling because you need the alcohol? And it's all about a temperature check to make sure that your consumption isn't overtaking, that addiction isn't creeping in. So it's this huge encouragement of responsible consumption, and anything in moderation is good.
That's what makes Sober October. And then that leads into November, or No Remember November. And then obviously, Did I Just Do That December? You know?
The guy I work with just did Sober October. And let me tell you, he was an inconsolable bastard that entire month. It was terrible.
Yeah, because you're like, fuck. I mean, how many times do we experience a lot of stress in our everyday lives? We're coming home and you want to open up a nice little drink. I know so many people that, do a cigar podcast or something where they come home and just open up a cigar. And that's a commitment. That's not something like, the one thing I never really understood until being explained to it by this guy was a cigar is not something that needs to be rushed. It is something that can be paired with a drink, but it is literally a 45-minute process. When you can't just smoke it like I did and then try and do stuff. You can't like be like, I'm going to smoke this and, watch the sunset. Next thing you know, sunset was done in 10 minutes. And I'm sitting there with a cigar halfway through trying to choke it down so I can get back out from the cold. And it's like bad experience. But sitting down, writing something, or just chilling with a friend and being able to smoke and talk, and, you're sitting there committed to talking with that person for the length of that cigar. It's the same thing with having a drink, pouring it with your friends. I mean, you're keeping yourself in check by doing a week of sobriety, but at the same time, you're also realizing like this is a thing that's supposed to be beneficial to your life. It's supposed to help ease some of the everyday stress that you go through. So don't turn it into something that you need it 24/7. You know, I mean, that's the best self check I've heard of, at least in a whiskey society. I would like to know though, what is one of your most memorable, like not where it started, but what's one of your most memorable things that you've experienced compared to one of the most memorable things that you've learned, maybe towards a certain thing about whiskey? Like, is there a certain brand that you learned maybe the history about that went through something?
One of the stories that I really have kind of fallen in love with was Colonel Taylor. So back in the late 19th century, rectifiers, people were buying barrels of whiskey, and in order to sell them and make more profit, they're adding crazy shit to them, like neutral grain spirits. They're dumping in tobacco spit for color. You know, so when you buy a bottle of whiskey in the late 19th century, you have no idea what you are putting into your body. So Colonel Taylor comes in and he presents legislation to make sure like that doesn't happen. So the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, he was the orchestrator of that, and he is noted as saving whiskey in America by that act. So there's a bunch of rules that go with bottled and bond, which is still an active thing today. You can still go to the whiskey store and get a bottled and bond. You know that you're buying a bottle that was it's out of a single growing season from a single distillery. It went into a bonded warehouse for no less than 4 years. So it can be older, but at a minimum, it's 4 years old, and it's sealed, and you know a bunch of federal regulation stuff, that other legal shit that goes into it. But that all came about because people were rectifying and adjusting it and varying it. And that story is pretty amazing. That came full circle for me because E.H. Taylor's great grandson, I hope I'm not fucking this up, a guy by the name of Dave Pickerel. Dave Pickerel he's long past, rest in peace, buddy. A master distiller for Maker's Mark, if you're familiar with them, and then left Maker's and did a whole bunch of other master distiller work in other distilleries before he passed away. He was a graduate of the military academy at West Point.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you know, I'm doing my whiskey research at West Point because I'm here. We live here, and all of a sudden I find out one of the guys whose whiskeys I love actually came through here and graduated from here, which is full circle, super cool.
Holy shit, we're related.
Yeah.
I see. I had that moment too. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Men Who Stare at Goats.
I've seen parts of it. I haven't seen it all the way through.
All right, that was a government project where they tried to develop these psychological warriors for the military to be able to like basically control your enemy using like a force movement type thing, thinking they can control the brain to do that, some psychic power stuff. I watched that movie and then 10 years later found out it was an actual government program. Then not only to find out that it's an actual government program, but to find out that it happened an hour away from me and my mom went to that high school. I was like, hold on, this is a real, like, this is so close to us. And you went there? My mom's like, yeah, I knew about that. I didn't know it was that big, but I just knew they had goats in a warehouse somewhere and they were using like the military and doing these things with them. I'm like, holy shit, like right on our home front. Like it was a whole new boost to me trying to want to learn more about it.
And that's my whiskey journey has been that. It's just been layers of an onion. You know, you peel back one and then that leads you over here to this story and oh my God, you know, that's so cool. And then you peel back this and the connection that whiskey has with American history is phenomenal. So I'm a history guy. Like that's my podcast is a mix of both.
Oh, you do a history podcast. You're a history guy. I never would have made that connection. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So it's, just the stories of, whiskey was the first domestic product ever to be taxed. First ever. So, which then led to the Whiskey Rebellion, which then led to the only time a sitting president has actually uniformed up and led troops to go do something. Anyway, so just layers, and you had mentioned prohibition earlier. Prohibition in and of itself, and I'm kind of waiting deep dive into that because I know once I get to Prohibition, it's going to be a month-long, 2-month-long
It's going to be
project.
a very long project. That thing goes deeper than you would ever think when it comes to how basically it tries to stick you around moonshining for sure because of the spark of that. But I mean, there, like you talk about whiskey rebellion, there were whiskey fighters. Like there are people that were signing up doing specific like elite teams to be able to sell whiskey and literally fighting the law for it. I mean, that was always, alcohol is a really still strange taboo subject to even talk about today. The fact that it's basically this crazy destructive substance just because of the way people choose to take it. I think, but I mean, it is an antidepressant, but people got to realize, like, you know, if you overconsume it, you do this too much, you're going to have a bad time, you know? Uh, there's so much out there, and it's a part of our history. You should definitely know more about. And I appreciate like someone like you having a podcast about that because, like, as much as you want to talk about all the stuff that's out there, all the content that's out there, literally typing in whiskey or typing in the hashtag whiskey podcast, and then first result was your picture, and I was like, all right, well, let's see what this guy's about. And then looking and listening to some of your episodes, I'm like, holy shit, I'm learning right now. And like it felt like you needed to have a drink in your hand. Like, do you do your show? Like, obviously, you have to do a lot of research and notes before you go on and do an episode and talk about just so you sound informed. You're not just pulling up random articles on like Wikipedia or something, but like going and doing all your research and kind of writing out an outline and everything. Do you find yourself trying to drink whatever you're talking about? Like, if they bring up a certain whiskey, do you ever try and look at that brand, or do you just ever try and enjoy one in your hand?
So whenever I record, it's there's always a drink in my hand. So I am a whiskey podcast. So I'll do a segue or a part in a piece that talks about what I'm drinking, give some history of the distillery that it comes out of, the company that comes from it, who like the master distiller that makes it. Real cool stuff when it comes to master distillers, people like Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey. So you see Wild Turkey on the shelves. That guy has been making whiskey since 1956, I believe it was. So like that's when he started making, and he's still actively making whiskey today, which is fucking crazy. But so I always try to incorporate what I'm drinking and give a little lesson about the whiskey that is drinking. I do drink whiskey when I podcast because it's, I don't know. I just really enjoy it. I love talking about history, and then the whiskey just kind of complements that, I guess.
Do you ever? Okay, so I have to ask this question because I was going to ask it earlier, but also I'm going to change the answer to what it was going to be to using whiskey. You ever just jump out of an airplane and want to drink whiskey while you're doing it? Like, I mean, I've seen so many videos where someone like cracks open a soda and they're like trying to float above it to get it all in their mouth because it's just going. You ever thought about doing that? Or is like, nah, that's too much money to be spending on something as dumb as that. But I'm like, if you really want to put your two art beautiful things together, that is the most fucking badass way to do it. Like, yeah, I drank whiskey while skydiving. Like, what the fuck did you just say? Like,
first off, officially let me say that I would never consume alcohol while skydiving or carry a container that could be dropped and hurt anybody in accordance with FAA regulations. However, yes, it has been an absolute thought. So tandems, when I do tandems, experiencing that first skydive with somebody, and tandems are due to the fact that they are literally strapped to you. It's an intimate experience, if for nothing else, and the fact that you're literally like attached to another human with straps and buckles and stuff. But once the parachute opens, and if it's their first one, the exhilaration that comes from that, being able to celebrate that in the moment. I have thought about that, like pulling out a quick little, like, shot glasses out of your shirt, whether, like pre-filled or whatever, and like handing them one and then taking one. All right, cheers, here we go. And then, congratulations, that always happens once we land. That's a thing with me.
Just land right by like a tree stump and then open up the tree stump and then pull out a whiskey. Like, all right, here we go. It's like, whoa. How'd you get that set up so perfectly? It's like, this is why we have a drop zone, bro. I land us right into two chairs where we get to enjoy whiskey together.
Yeah. So it's definitely an after party for all of it. But yeah, that's been a thought to share.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming and doing the podcast, Ian. It's been awesome talking to you, man. I want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your content too about your podcast, because I want people to find this interesting thing, man. I think that's what you're doing, incorporating history and also a little bit of fun into it. I love that.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to come. I got really excited when I got your message, like, hey, do you want to come and share content? Because that's one of the big things I'm hoping to do is just to talk to people and in not just, history folks and whiskey folks, but everybody's got a story. Your story has been so much fun to listen to as you turn me on to your podcast, and I'm finding myself listening to episode after episode. I think I got through 3 episodes while I was setting up the lights the other day, and just have absolutely enjoyed.
If I've had to ask, what was one story that really fascinated you? Because I feel like my life's pretty boring and bland.
Not at all. So up until today with the whole jet ski thing, because I find that pretty fucking cool, and would like to talk about like the Hurricane Sandy thing. That'd be.
I mean, hey, if you want to, I'll be more than happy to be open to it, dude. I got hit by a jet ski too. I don't know if you heard that yet.
Nope, haven't heard that.
I know I'm pretty random in a lot of my topics on my podcast.
You are, and that's what makes your show so much fun is it starts at A and then takes a detour down to T and then comes up to G, and it's phenomenal.
The best advice is don't skip a minute into my podcast, because we're probably going to hit on something else.
You would be totally lost if you did.
I tried doing it to go back to my notes. I'm like, hold on, okay, this goes here. I know we talk about this and then that. So let me skip 10 minutes in. It's like, next thing you know, we're talking about aliens and space. I'm like, all right, fuck. When did we hit that part?
You were talking with, I don't remember her name, but she's the No Shit podcast.
Amy Nichols. Yeah.
Amy. And you guys were talking about social structure and
it's a common one that gets brought up in the podcast. A lot of people get to see, like, we're in a factory work lifestyle. A lot of people are being, the machines, all these types of things that have obviously benefited our society. It seems like our society now runs to function out people that work this 9-to-5 lifestyle.
Yeah, and that was you had a couple of really great points during that, and your view on social structure and coming with your psychology background. So there's weight to it. And that seeing how other people view society and how they put all of these puzzle pieces together in their mind and they present that forward has been something that's so fascinating, because you and I can go through the exact same experience, right? We skydive, right? That skydive, in my memory and my thought, is going to be a completely different story or experience than that skydive in your mind and your thought. And you bring that to the table, and so you have 2 people together talking about the exact same thing, but in very different perspectives. And it's just phenomenal.
You'll come across
in a respectful way, and there's no argument, there's no fight, it's just the mutual realm of respect for differences, and that is honorable.
Yeah, you get to look at that too when you look at your podcast doing history too. Like, you're seeing it from this perspective. And then if you go and try and look at the company or whoever, the other side that is getting torn down, or let's say if you're trying to ban a whiskey or ban this in a certain area, look from the law perspective, and then look from the other person's perspective that's not going to be able to sell their product anymore. Like, you get 2 different completely stories. When it comes to me and you skydiving, you're going to have hopefully a way better interaction with me, mostly because I'm going to be scared shitless unless you have a bowl of Honey Smacks. If you have a bowl of Honey Smacks, I'll basically do anything. I hate to say that onto a podcast, but literally that's like the one thing. It's like, that's how you get me into the airplane. And then once we're up there, you just chuck a box out the window. I'm like, that's $5 and jump out of the airplane. But I mean, yeah, I think that's really important things I try and do with my podcast too. I try and make sure that when it's a conversation that like it's all about seeing the other person's perspective. I mean, we've taken separate walks of life, so we're not going to have the same thoughts and same stories, and that's okay. But let's talk about them and always try and, just see the other person's perspective is the highlight and the importance of this thing. And like I said, Ian, I appreciate you doing the podcast, man. I definitely, I'm glad to know that something like your podcast is out there because it's something that I don't know too much about when it comes to alcohol, but it's definitely fascinating hearing you read off stories and a little bit of history that goes to something.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Just sharing, and that's why where I came up with the name was Why Whiskey. Just sharing why whiskey for me. What is it? And whiskey for me is history. So being able to tie the two together and maybe share something that isn't quite known, and getting people to understand that it is a substance that often gets a negative light, but it's got a great story, and telling the story is what I hope to do.
Well, I do want to give you here a minute at the end so people can find your content. Can you tell them where to get it? Is it on Instagram? I'll give them all the links to everything, and I'll make sure I put it all in the description as well.
Sure. It's Why Whiskey is the name of the podcast. You can find me on Castbox, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Pocket Casts, I believe.
Yeah.
Why Whiskey History at gmail.com is my email. I am on Instagram as well. I am a whiskey podcast with a history problem, or a history podcast with a whiskey problem. We'll let you decide. That's kind of our the opening line for us.
I like that. Well, thanks so much, Ian, for being on this episode Out of the Blank, and stay tuned for our next episode.